The cold, sterile hum of Earth's most advanced communications hub filled the air as Captain Alex Ryder stood in front of the massive terminal, watching the unfolding transmission. It had been a long time since Ryder had been called to the front lines, long after a scandal had tarnished his once decorated military career. Now, standing before him was a message unlike any other. The data, intercepted from the deepest corners of space, was cryptic but unmistakably urgent. A series of repeating signals, originating from a point light years away, had pierced the heart of Earth's defensive network. An anomaly. Ryder's mind raced. The signal had an unnatural cadence, a rhythm that felt almost alive. His fingers hovered over the console as he awaited the Federation's top scientists to decrypt the message. Within moments, a decoded translation appeared on the screen. "We are the Omega Collective. We are coming. We will test your worth." The words hit like a slap to the face. A chill ran through Ryder's spine, not from fear, but from the cold realization of something far worse. The Omega Collective, a name known only in ancient texts, a civilization once believed to have vanished millennia ago. They were not a race of explorers nor conquerors. They were something different. Their tests, according to legend, were designed to challenge the very fabric of a species. They did not invade. They tested, but the cost of failure was never clear. Behind him, the door slid open, and the commander of Earth's Defense Force, General Hara Kinkid, entered the room, her face grim. She was a woman of few words, but in this moment, Ryder could sense her unease. "Ryder," she said, her voice low and sharp, "we're assembling a team. You've been selected to lead it." Ryder turned, his brows furrowed. A team? For what? Hara motioned to the console, where the decoded message still blinked. "For this. The Omega Collective is coming, and we need the best humanity has to offer." Ryder's heart pounded. This wasn't a routine mission. There would be no negotiation, no surrender. It was clear now. The fate of humanity was about to be decided, and the Omega Collective wasn't asking for a fight. They were offering a test, one that Earth had no choice but to take. He hadn't seen a mission like this since his last days in active duty. He had made too many enemies during his time as a soldier. Too many mistakes, and now the universe was giving him a chance at redemption, or a chance to watch humanity fall. "We have no idea what we're up against," Ryder said, looking at the message again. "You said we needed the best. How are you going to assemble this team?" Hara's lips tightened into a thin line. "The best isn't just strength. It's willpower, cunning, and the ability to inspire others. I selected your team members, but you'll need to convince them to trust you." Her gaze locked on his. "This is not just a military mission. It's a test for all of humanity, and I'm counting on you to lead them." Ryder's mind churned. He wasn't just leading soldiers. He would be leading people who didn't know each other, didn't trust each other, and most importantly, who didn't know if they could survive the trials ahead. "Who's on the team?" he asked, finally. "The best from every corner of Earth and its colonies," she said. "You'll meet them soon enough. We need to move quickly, Captain. The Collected's fleet is already on its way." As she left the room, Ryder stood alone, staring at the ominous words on the screen. He knew what was coming, and he knew that this was his last chance to prove himself. The Omega Reckoning had begun, and the countdown to humanity's greatest trial had started. Ryder stood at the edge of the Federation's landing platform, the roar of shuttles and the hum of power generators filling the air. The team was assembling, each member of Earth's elite warriors handpicked for a single mission. Yet, as Ryder watched the faces of the soldiers, technicians, and strategists, he could feel the weight of doubt settling on him like a storm cloud. He'd led men and women into combat before, but this felt different. This wasn't a war. They weren't facing an enemy they could outsmart or overpower with sheer firepower. The Omega Collective's trials were something else entirely. The first to step off the transport was Lieutenant Mara Calloway, an ex-space marine with a reputation for turning the tide in impossible situations. Her short-cropped hair and intense gaze made her appear cold, but Ryder knew better than to judge by appearances. She wasn't the type to flinch under pressure. He saw her eyeing the surroundings, assessing the platform as though it were a potential battleground. "Captain," she greeted him with a slight nod. Her voice, sharp and professional, lacked warmth, but that was to be expected. They had never served together before, and trust wasn't earned in an instant. Not in a place like this. "Lieutenant," Ryder acknowledged her, scanning the rest of the team as they disembarked. The next to step forward was Dr. Zara Rahim, the Federation's foremost bioengineering expert. She had an aura of quiet intelligence, her every movement precise and calculated. Her long dark hair was tied back in a tight ponytail, and her eyes were sharp, constantly scanning the team. Her work on human enhancement programs had garnered both admiration and controversy. Some thought her enhancements were unethical, but Ryder couldn't afford to be concerned with such things now. The fact was, she'd helped design the very genetic modifications that had given humanity the edge they'd relied on in recent decades. "Ready to face the unknown?" Ryder asked, raising an eyebrow. Zara gave a wry smile. "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little excited. It's not every day you get to study an ancient alien race." Ryder grunted, his face betraying no emotion. "We're not here to study, Dr. Rahim. We're here to survive." She nodded, but her eyes gleamed with curiosity, not fear. It would be a while before Ryder could fully trust her. Scientists weren't always the best soldiers, but he had no choice but to rely on her expertise now. The third member of the team was an enigma. Jarek Voss, a former mercenary turned freedom fighter, with ties to rebel factions across the galaxy. His reputation was a mixed bag. Some called him a hero, others a war criminal. His past was shrouded in secrecy, but his skills in guerrilla warfare and unconventional tactics were unmatched. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and an intimidating presence that made even Ryder take notice. He stood off to the side, arms crossed, scanning the platform with cold detachment. "What's your read on the situation, Voss?" Ryder asked, his voice calm but firm. Voss gave him a sharp, assessing look before answering. "The situation is simple. The collective doesn't care about us. They're here to test our worth, and that means they'll push us to the edge. We'll either adapt and survive, or we'll fail." Ryder nodded. The man's bluntness was grating at times, but it was the kind of honesty that could save lives. As the rest of the team assembled, Ryder took a deep breath. He had been given command of this group, but it wasn't the kind of unity he was used to. The Omega Collective's trials would break them in ways that no amount of training could prepare them for. They would have to rely on each other, whether they liked it or not. "Listen up," Ryder barked, his voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. The team fell silent, turning their attention to him. "The collective isn't here to negotiate. They're here to test us, and they won't stop until they're satisfied. There's no retreat. There's no backup. It's us, and whatever they throw at us." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We're here to pass their test, no matter the cost." His gaze swept over the team, meeting each of their eyes in turn. The doubt in the air was palpable, but he couldn't afford to let it show. Not now. The ship was leaving in moments, and the next phase of humanity's greatest trial awaited them. They were about to make history, one way or another. "Let's move out," Ryder ordered, turning toward the shuttle that would carry them into the unknown. As the team boarded, Ryder felt the weight of the universe press down on him. The Omega Collective had come, and the reckoning had begun. There would be no turning back. The journey through deep space felt endless. The small shuttle rumbled as it passed through the void, its engines barely making a sound in the silence of the cosmos. Ryder stared out at the stars, a cold, unyielding sea stretching into eternity. His mind raced through what awaited them. None of it felt real. It was as if the universe had thrown them into a trial they weren't prepared for. Yet, in his heart, Ryder knew there was no room for doubt. Failure wasn't an option. "We're approaching the planet." Dr. Rahim's voice broke the silence, her voice steady but with a hint of excitement. She had been monitoring their descent, her eyes fixed on the data streaming across her screens. "It's a barren world, rich in minerals but without any sign of life. At least, not the kind we're familiar with." "Then we'll make sure to make it our home for the duration," Ryder replied. His tone was calm, but he could feel the tension building. What awaited them on this world could mean the end of everything. The shuttle began its descent through the atmosphere. The planet below was a rust-red ball, crisscrossed with deep, jagged canyons, towering cliffs, and empty plains. The air was thin, with an almost suffocating pressure. The landscape appeared lifeless, but Ryder knew better than to assume. The collective's first test would be anything but straightforward. As the shuttle landed, the doors opened with a heavy hiss. The team was met with a harsh wind, carrying the scent of metal and dust. Ryder immediately pulled his helmet on, securing it with a swift motion. His team followed suit, their expressions grim but determined. The ground beneath them was firm, but there was something unsettling about the silence that enveloped the planet. It was as though the world itself was holding its breath. "Let's move," Ryder ordered, scanning the horizon. The rest of the team fell into formation, weapons at the ready. The moment they stepped beyond the shuttle's protective field, the ground trembled. The earth shifted violently beneath their feet, as if something massive had stirred beneath the surface. A low, rumbling growl echoed from the distance. "Company," Voss muttered, his eyes narrowing. Suddenly, the ground erupted in front of them, sending a shockwave through the team. Massive, sinewy beasts, each standing over 3 meters tall, with armor like scales and bloodshot eyes, burst from the earth, their mouths open to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth. Their bodies were massive, like a fusion of predator and machine, capable of crushing anything in their path. Ryder didn't hesitate. He raised his pulse rifle and fired, sending a burst of energy into the nearest beast. It howled in agony, but it didn't fall. It only grew more in rage. "Fall back," he shouted. The team quickly dispersed, their weapons blazing. Mara Calloway immediately took position to provide cover, using her quick reflexes to pick off smaller creatures that darted through the chaos. But the creatures were relentless. Their strength was beyond human comprehension, each blow from their powerful limbs causing shockwaves that reverberated through the ground. Ryder could see his team struggling to keep up with the onslaught. The beasts were faster than they had anticipated, and their resistance to conventional weapons made it clear this was only the first of many trials. "Ryder, these things." Dr. Rahim's voice crackled through his comms, her breath sharp and quick. "They're not just genetically engineered. They're evolved to adapt. We need to hit them harder, faster, or we'll be overrun." Ryder gritted his teeth. "We're not getting overrun. Keep moving. Don't let them trap you." As the battle raged, Ryder found himself in a brutal hand-to-hand fight with one of the beasts. It charged at him, its claws swiping through the air with deadly speed. He dodged, rolling out of the way, and then landed a swift punch to its side, only to feel the bone-shaking impact rattle his bones. The creature swung its massive tail, knocking him to the ground. He gasped for air, his vision blurring from the force of the blow. A bright flash of light suddenly cut through the chaos. Mara's energy cannon discharged a pulse that sent the beast flying back, but it didn't fall. Instead, it writhed in agony, seemingly unaffected by the blast. It was adapting. They were all adapting. "We need to finish this. Now," Ryder shouted, pulling himself to his feet. He signaled to the team, and they converged on the largest beast, their attacks coordinated in a final desperate push. With one final assault, a joint strike of high-powered plasma shots and strategically aimed explosives, they brought the massive beast to its knees. The creature let out a deafening roar before collapsing, twitching one last time. But Ryder knew this victory was fleeting. The trial had just begun, and the collective had more in store than they could ever anticipate. Panting, his team regrouped, their expressions strained. Ryder's heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. That was only the beginning, Voss muttered, wiping blood from his brow. We survived the first test, Ryder replied, his voice steely. But we need to be ready for what's next. The Omega Collective isn't done with us yet. The wind howled across the barren landscape as the team huddled near their shuttle, scanning the horizon for signs of movement. The dust had begun to settle, and the silence that followed the death of the monstrous creatures was unsettling. No words were exchanged as Ryder's team wiped the sweat and blood from their faces. They had survived the first trial, but the weight of what had just happened pressed heavily on their shoulders. Ryder's eyes narrowed as he glanced at the sky. The Omega Collective hadn't given them a moment to breathe. The challenge had been brutal, but it was clear the collective wasn't interested in physical strength alone. No, they were testing something deeper, something far more dangerous. We need to move, Ryder ordered. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. He didn't know what was coming next, but the feeling gnawing at him was unmistakable. The worst was yet to come. Dr. Rahim was the first to speak. The creatures, they weren't just strong. They were intelligent. Their ability to adapt so quickly, it's like they've been engineered to react to our strategies in real time. But that was physical. Whatever the collective has planned next, it won't be that simple. Ryder nodded. Keep your heads on straight. We're not here to win battles. We're here to survive. If the collective is testing our minds, then we need to be ready for whatever they throw at us. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet shifted again. Not in the way it had when the beasts emerged, but with an almost imperceptible tremor. The sky above flickered, the stars themselves seeming to pulse in and out of existence. Ryder felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Minds, Voss muttered. They're playing with us already. Without warning, the world around them began to distort. Ryder's vision blurred, the ground beneath him rippling like a pool of water disturbed by a stone. His team reacted immediately, weapons raised, but everything seemed wrong. The light bent in impossible angles, and the very air felt thick, as if it were pressing in on them. Dr. Rahim clutched her head in her hands. This isn't real, she gasped. It's an illusion. They're manipulating us. Ryder's voice cut through the panic. Stay focused. These are mind games. Don't let them get to you. But it was already too late. In an instant, the landscape shattered and reformed. The jagged cliffs they had been standing near twisted into unnatural shapes, like something from a nightmare. The familiar, arid world around them morphed into something entirely different, a lush, green jungle thick with mist. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth, and the ground was soft beneath their boots, but none of it made sense. They were no longer on the desert planet. They were somewhere else, somewhere that felt wrong. Ryder's heart skipped a beat as he turned to his team. Their faces, though still intact, were different. Mara Calloway's eyes were wide with terror. Zara Rahim's hands trembled, and Voss looked like he was reliving something from his past. A haunted look flickered across his face, like he was seeing something only he could understand. What's going on? Mara's voice was hoarse. Where are we? Before Ryder could respond, a shape moved from the shadows. A figure, tall and cloaked, stepped forward. It was a distorted version of Ryder, but not quite. The face was his own, but twisted, with sharp features and eyes that gleamed with malevolent purpose. You think you can lead them? The figure asked, its voice an echo of Ryder's own. You think you can protect them? Ryder's blood ran cold. The illusion, whatever it was, had taken the shape of his darkest fears. His own image turned against him. I know you, the figure hissed. You failed once before. What makes you think you can succeed now? Ryder's mind reeled. His past was something he had buried deep, a mistake that had haunted him for years. The day his actions led to the deaths of innocent civilians. A miscalculation, a botched operation. The event had shattered his career, and no matter how much he had tried to move on, the guilt had never truly left him. Don't listen to it. Voss's voice was low, strained. It's not real. But Ryder wasn't sure anymore. The line between reality and illusion was blurring, and his confidence began to slip. The figure stepped closer, its grin growing wider. Your team will fall. You'll fail again. You're not fit to lead. You never were. Ryder's fists clenched. He could feel the anger rising, the shame of his past threatening to swallow him whole. But just as the weight of his past began to crush him, he remembered something. He remembered his team, his duty, the lives he had yet to save. With a forceful shove, Ryder pushed past the figure, the illusion crumbling as his focus returned. The jungle faded, the distorted version of himself disappearing into the mist. "You're right," Ryder muttered, though he wasn't sure who he was speaking to. "I'm not perfect, but I'm not giving up." As the landscape shifted back to the harsh, barren world they had originally landed on, Ryder realized that the trial wasn't just about surviving the illusions. It was about conquering them. The collective was testing not just their physical limits, but their minds, their resolve, their ability to keep moving forward in the face of failure. His team stood around him, visibly shaken, but no one had broken. Not yet. "We're not done," Ryder said, his voice calm but resolute. "Stay sharp. This was just the beginning." The air was thick with tension as Ryder's team gathered again, their eyes warier now, their movements more deliberate. The harsh landscape around them had returned, but the echoes of their mental struggle lingered, gnawing at them. The illusion of their fears had passed, but it was clear. The Omega Collective wasn't going to make this easy. They were testing every aspect of what made them human: body, mind, and spirit. "We made it through the first 2 trials," Ryder said, his voice low but steady. "But we can't afford to get comfortable. Whatever they throw at us next will be worse. I can feel it." Dr. Rahim, her face pale and drawn, nodded in agreement. "They're pushing us to the edge. And the worst part, we don't know what comes next. We don't know what they're capable of." Mara, ever the pragmatist, shifted her weight, her hands resting on the grip of her sidearm. "I'm ready for whatever comes. I don't care what mind tricks they play. I don't care how strong their beasts are. But we need to stick together." Ryder turned to her, meeting her gaze. "We will. But remember, this trial isn't just about survival. It's about what we're willing to sacrifice, and that's something none of us can predict." Before anyone could respond, a rumbling sound erupted from the ground. A fissure cracked open beneath them, and from the chasm, a low, guttural voice echoed, sending a shiver through the group. "One of you will fall," the voice declared, its tone carrying an unsettling finality. "Choose wisely." The ground shook violently, and before anyone could react, a towering wall of light and energy formed before them, cutting them off from the shuttle. On the other side, a single figure appeared, bathed in a soft, radiant glow, a being so vast and imposing that it seemed to fill the entire landscape. Its form was humanoid, but its features were obscured, as though it was something beyond comprehension. "Is that?" Zara started, but her voice trailed off in disbelief. "The collective," Ryder finished. "They're showing themselves now." The figure's voice boomed, sending ripples through the air. "You stand at the edge of everything you've known. What will you sacrifice to prove your worth? One life for the others. Choose. Time is fleeting." For a moment, no one moved. Ryder's heart raced. His mind raced. This wasn't a question. This wasn't a challenge. It was a test. They could feel it in their bones. "Choose," Voss growled, stepping forward. "What do you mean by that?" "One of us has to die." "Not just die," the figure's voice reverberated like the wind, chilling them to their core. "Sacrifice. To prove that you understand the cost of survival. One life will save the others. A simple choice. A single death to bring victory. Ryder's breath caught in his throat. His first instinct was to fight, to find a way around this challenge, to outthink it. But deep down, he knew there was no escaping this test. The collective's trials were as much about psychology as they were about strength. Ryder. Zara's voice trembled as she glanced between the team members, her eyes wide with dread. We can't just sacrifice one of us. There has to be another way. Ryder's thoughts raced. This wasn't just about killing someone to save the rest. It was about what they valued more. The group's survival, or the individual lives within it. It was a choice between doing what was right and doing what was necessary. Mara's eyes locked onto Ryder. What if they're testing how much we care about each other? How far we'll go? Are we willing to let one of us die for the rest? The voice of the collective echoed again. Time is running out. One life for many. Choose now. Ryder's mind flashed to the faces of his team, each one so different yet equally vital. Mara, Zara, Voss. Each of them had their strengths. Each of them had fought beside him, trusted him. He couldn't make this decision. Not like this. But the collective wasn't waiting for him to figure it out. As the figure's presence grew, the air around them crackled with energy, amplifying the pressure. I won't make this choice, Ryder said, his voice hard. We don't choose. We stand together. A silence fell over them, the oppressive weight of the trial pressing down. The figure watched them, seemingly unfazed by their refusal. Then you choose nothing, the figure intoned, its voice carrying the finality of an execution. And all of you will be lost. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet cracked open again, sending them tumbling to the earth. The energy field that had kept them separated vanished in an instant, and they were left exposed to whatever came next. Ryder's heart pounded in his chest, but there was no time for fear. The collective had shown them what it could do, what it could force them to face. But now, they were no longer reacting to the trial. They were making their own choices. We're not done yet, Ryder said, his voice firm. Stay sharp. We've made it this far. We will make it further. The team stood, battered but unbroken, ready to face whatever sacrifice or challenge the Omega Collective would throw at them next. They had learned something invaluable. The greatest strength wasn't in one individual, but in their unity. And that would be the key to their survival. Ryder's heart pounded as the world around them shifted once more. They had barely regained their footing after the latest trial, but the collective was not done with them. His team stood in a tight circle, eyes scanning the horizon. The ground still trembled beneath their feet, but there was a sense of quiet before the storm. Is it over? Mara whispered, her voice tinged with doubt. Or are they just waiting for us to let our guard down? We can't afford to think it's over, Ryder said, his eyes never leaving the shifting terrain around them. Whatever happens next, we have to stay focused. Stay together. A sharp gust of wind kicked up, swirling the dust in their faces. Suddenly, without warning, a massive crack echoed through the air. The earth split open again, and from the darkness of the rift, figures emerged, shadowy, indistinct shapes that seemed to materialize from the void itself. They moved quickly, so quickly that Ryder could barely track them, their bodies shifting and warping with each step, like smoke coming to life. What the hell is that? Voss muttered, aiming his weapon at the approaching shadows. They're illusions, Dr. Rahim said quickly, but not like before. These are different. They're trying to manipulate us. Ryder's instincts screamed at him to get ready, but the shadows weren't acting like mere enemies. They weren't attacking outright. Instead, they moved among them, taking on familiar forms, faces that looked almost like his teammates. No, Ryder muttered under his breath, his grip tightening on his rifle. No, this is different. One of the shadows stepped forward, its form coalescing into something recognizably human. A face appeared, Voss's. It grinned at Ryder, the expression filled with cold, calculating malice. You're all weak, the illusion of Voss sneered. You can't trust each other. You'll break, just like you always do. You can't even trust the one you're supposed to follow. Ryder felt a cold chill run down his spine. The illusion's words were unsettling. Too close to truths he had long buried. It was a test, he realized. A test of loyalty. A trial to see how far they would go to protect each other, and how easily they would turn on one another. Mara's voice cut through the tension. It's not real. This is just more manipulation. But the shadows were relentless. Another figure emerged, this time mimicking Dr. Rahim, her face twisted into a mocking smile. You've been following him blindly. Ryder is a failure. You'll all die because of him. Can't you see that? The illusions grew bolder, shifting seamlessly from one teammate's face to another's, each one accusing Ryder, turning their words against him. The doubts that had festered in the back of his mind began to surface. He could feel his trust in his team being tested, questioned by the very people who had fought beside him. Each shadow echoed something familiar, the crushing weight of leadership, the fear that he was leading them all to their deaths. Ryder, don't listen to them, Zora said, stepping forward. But her voice faltered as her own shadow appeared beside her, her eyes now filled with suspicion. He's not the leader you think he is. He'll fail you, just like everyone else has failed. Ryder's hands shook as the weight of the illusions pressed in on him. The words they spoke weren't unfamiliar. They echoed his own deepest fears, the possibility that he wasn't good enough, that his failures would catch up with him and destroy everything he had worked for. His eyes flicked to his team, each of them staring back at him, uncertain, unsure whether they should believe the shadows or trust him. The bond between them, one of trust and camaraderie, was slipping, and Ryder knew that if he didn't act, if he didn't do something soon, the collective would win. They're trying to make us doubt each other, Ryder said, his voice stronger now, though the uncertainty lingered. We're a team. We trust each other. We don't turn on each other. Voss's shadow advanced toward him, pointing a finger. You think you're the leader. You think you can keep them alive. You'll be the one who gets them killed. They know it. They're just waiting for the moment to turn on you. Ryder's eyes locked onto the shadows, and in that moment, something inside him clicked. The voice was trying to manipulate him, to sow division. His heart pounded, but a cold clarity settled over him. He wasn't going to let it happen. Not this time. You think you can break us with fear, he shouted, his voice echoing over the battlefield. You think we'll fall apart. We've made it this far together, and we'll make it further, no matter what you throw at us. In an instant, the illusions faltered. The figures, once so vivid and powerful, began to distort, their forms flickering like a broken hologram. The shadows that had been so convincing melted away, their voices dissipating into nothing. Ryder's breath came in short bursts, but the fear, the doubt, it was gone. He turned to his team, eyes hard with determination. We're still here. We're still together. No one's turning on anyone. No one's getting left behind. The tension lifted, though the trial wasn't over. Ryder knew the collective was watching, waiting for their next move. But he also knew one thing. They wouldn't break. Not now. Not ever. His team was stronger than the shadows they faced, and as long as they stayed united, they could overcome anything the Omega Collective threw at them. We move forward, Ryder said, his voice firm. Together. The air crackled with anticipation, the uneasy calm after the trial of betrayal hanging over them like a storm cloud. Ryder's team stood in the center of the shifting landscape, their faces grim but determined. They had survived the shadows of their own doubts, the illusions that sought to tear them apart. But the collective's trials were relentless, and Ryder knew that this was only the beginning of something much worse. Stay alert, Ryder murmured, his eyes scanning the horizon. If we've learned anything, it's that the collective won't give up until they've broken us. The ground beneath them began to tremble again, this time with a steady rhythmic pulse. The air grew heavier, as though the very fabric of time itself was stretching thin. Ryder felt a sense of unease settle in his gut. This wasn't just another physical challenge. It wasn't even another mind game. It was something far worse. Without warning, the world around them blurred, the landscape distorting as though they were caught in the grip of a nightmare. The sun blinked out of existence, replaced by a cold, oppressive darkness. For a moment, everything was still. Then, a voice, deep and ancient, echoed from the void. "The trial is simple," it said, its tone vibrating through the very core of their beings. "You will face the passage of time itself. What will you do when it runs out? What will you sacrifice when you have only moments left?" The darkness shattered like glass, revealing a new world. An alien city, towering spires stretching up into the sky, bathed in the light of an unfamiliar sun. The streets were crowded with faceless figures, moving like ants in a frenzy. Above them, the sky pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, as though the very passage of time was being manipulated, stretched and compressed with each passing moment. Ryder felt his pulse quicken. Time. The collective was testing them with time. But how? Then it hit him. The world around them began to shift again. The cityscape crumbled, the streets warping and twisting into something else entirely, a bleak, empty void where nothing remained but the steady tick of an unseen clock. Each tick echoed louder in their minds, the passage of time itself pressing in on them like a vice. "You have been given a choice," the voice intoned. "1 hour. An hour to achieve your goal, to complete your mission. If you fail, you will be trapped here, forever, bound to the ticking of the clock. The rest of your team will move on without you. You will remain in the past, frozen, unable to escape." Ryder's breath caught in his throat. Time wasn't just passing. They were now in a place where time was fluid, malleable. The clock that ticked above them seemed to mock their every move, counting down with each second. The reality of what was happening began to settle in. The collective wasn't just testing their physical endurance or their mental fortitude. They were forcing them to confront the most human of fears, the fear of time slipping away. Zara stepped forward, her face tight with concentration. "We're running out of time," she said, her voice sharp. "We have to act. Now." Ryder nodded, turning to face the team. He could see the fear in their eyes, the panic beginning to take hold. But he also saw something else, something stronger. Determination. "We're not alone in this," Ryder said, his voice steady despite the ticking clock. "We faced everything the collective has thrown at us, and we've come through stronger each time. This is no different." But as the seconds ticked away, the world around them continued to shift, the cityscape crumbling and reforming. With each change, they seemed to lose ground, their path forward growing more uncertain. "We need to move," Voss said urgently. "The clock. Look." Above them, the clock's hands began to move faster, each tick louder than the last. The pressure in the air grew heavier, more oppressive, and Ryder felt the weight of their situation crushing down on him. If they didn't act soon, they would be trapped in this warped, timeless space forever. "We need to find the source," Ryder said, his voice low but firm. "Whatever's controlling this, we have to destroy it. Only then will we be able to escape." The team moved as one, their steps quick but measured, each of them knowing that the slightest hesitation could cost them everything. They moved through the distorted city, weaving through shifting streets and alleyways that seemed to pulse with time itself. The world around them felt like it was collapsing in on them, and with each passing second, the pressure grew. As they neared what appeared to be the center of the city, a massive tower loomed in the distance. The clock tower. Its face was cracked, the hands spinning wildly out of control. The clock's ticking grew louder, faster, echoing in their ears. "We're almost there," Dr. Rahim said, her voice strained. "We can't let it keep going like this." But as they reached the tower's base, something shifted. A shadow, like an arm of the clock itself, reached down from the sky, and Ryder realized the truth. The time was running out. They weren't just battling the clock. They were racing against themselves. The trial was designed to break them by making them confront the inevitable, what they would do when time was all but gone. Ryder glanced at his team. The clock was ticking, but they were still moving forward. The trial was nearing its end, but they wouldn't stop. Not until they won. "We finish this," Ryder said, voice resolute. No matter what. The clock tower loomed above them, its face cracked, its hands ticking mercilessly. Each second that passed was a reminder that they were running out of time. Quite literally. The weight of the final trial pressed down on Ryder's team like a relentless storm, but they pushed forward, refusing to be broken. "We can't let it win," Mara said, her voice hoarse but determined. She was the first to reach the base of the tower, her eyes locked on the shifting clock face above them. "This is the final trial. We finish it, or we become part of its nightmare." Ryder nodded, his gaze hard. He could feel the pulse of the tower beneath his feet, the distorted rhythm of time vibrating through the very air around them. The collective had made this trial one of impossible pressure, forcing them to confront not just the limitations of time, but their own inner fears and desires. But now it was clear. The only way forward was to destroy the source, the very heart of the manipulation. Voss stepped forward, his hand shaking slightly as he gripped his weapon, his eyes narrowing at the tower. "How do we destroy it? It feels alive, like it's watching us." Dr. Rahim raised her hand, her eyes scanning the clock tower's intricate design. "The clock, it's not just controlling time. It's feeding on it. There must be a core, a nexus inside, somewhere that controls the flow. If we destroy that, we destroy the trial." The ground shook violently beneath them, and Ryder felt the cold rush of air as something massive descended from the sky. An enormous shadow, its form indistinct. The figure of the collective appeared once more, standing atop the clock tower, its form as menacing as ever. Its voice echoed through the air, a deep rumble that sent shivers through their spines. "You've made it this far, but this is your final test," the voice boomed. "You are not strong enough to defeat me. Time is my domain, and you cannot escape it. You will be consumed, lost in the endless passage, forever." The team paused, eyes locked on the figure. But Ryder wasn't afraid. Not anymore. He had faced the darkness, the doubts, the fears of his team and himself. They had made it this far together, and they weren't going to back down now. "We're not done yet," Ryder said, his voice unwavering. "We're still standing, and we won't fall." The figure on the tower grinned, its eyes glinting with cruel amusement. "Then come, show me what you are willing to sacrifice." With a deafening crack, the ground split open, revealing a swirling vortex of time. An impossible black hole, stretching and contorting in on itself. The air was thick with the sound of 1,000 ticking clocks, the echoes of lost moments and shattered futures. Ryder looked at his team, seeing the same resolve in their eyes. They knew what had to be done. "Move," Ryder shouted. The team surged forward, racing toward the tower's base. As they reached the foot of the structure, the ground beneath them buckled and twisted, trying to pull them into the vortex. But they fought back, their every movement a testament to the strength they had built together. Dr. Rahim was the first to reach the tower's entrance, her hands pressing against the ancient stone, searching for a way inside. The others followed, weapons ready, eyes scanning for the core. A sharp, distorted noise rang through the air as a door slid open, revealing a dimly lit chamber. The heart of the tower, a massive crystal-like object, hovered in the center of the room, pulsing with an eerie light. It radiated the very essence of time. Chaotic, infinite, and untouchable. It was the source of everything, the beating heart of the collective's manipulation. "It's there," Dr. Rahim said, her voice tinged with awe. "We have to destroy it." Ryder didn't hesitate. "Do it." Voss and Mara moved into position, taking aim at the heart of the crystal. But before they could fire, the collective's figure reappeared, its shadow stretching across the room, filling the space with darkness. "You are too late," the figure hissed. "You cannot escape the inevitable. Time will crush you." But Ryder stood firm, his eyes locked onto the crystal. "We control our destiny. Not you. Not time." With that, he signaled to Mara and Voss. They fired. The blast from their weapons struck the crystal with a deafening explosion. The tower groaned, its structure shuddering as the crystal's power fractured, splintering into 1,000 shards. The vortex above them howled in agony, its grip weakening, unraveling. The Collected's figure screamed in fury as its form began to break apart, dissolving into the air like mist. Time, once twisted, once malleable, began to settle, its flow returning to its natural course. The world around them stilled, and the oppressive weight that had pressed down on them for so long was lifted. Ryder exhaled, his shoulders sagging in relief. The trial was over. "We did it," Zara said, her voice hoarse with exhaustion but filled with relief. Ryder looked around at his team, their faces worn but proud. They had faced the trials of fear, sacrifice, betrayal, and time itself, and they had survived. They had proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't just in its ability to fight, but in its capacity to endure, to overcome, and to stand united in the face of impossible odds. "We're still standing," Ryder said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "And that's all that matters." The trials of the Alma the Collective had come to an end, but their journey was far from over.